We're looking at the best CPUs for 2024, following what are probably the last launches for the year. We've benchmarked most of the major CPUs out right now and have a huge lineup for you today, but there's a remaining sort of weird factor from last year, and it's becoming a trend. Prior generation parts now sometimes remain still the best options in some of these categories. It's making things interesting because now it's like 3 generations of older stuff up against new stuff, and it wasn't always the case that 3 generations of prior parts existed new in box, but with AMD and Intel alike, there are actually good older parts available in some categories alongside the brand new stuff, like the 9800X3D. So today we're going over the best overall, the best gaming CPU, which is a very simple category. It's just, it's either at the top of the chart or it's not. The most balanced, looking at a number of factors, in addition to things like the most efficient and some of the other award categories we have, like budget and sub $100 CPUs. And this series is my favorite series to work on every year with the best of roundups, so let's get into it. We brought you this video with our brand new premium dice sets for tabletop gaming, like Dungeons & Dragons, Magic, and other games. These include our GN Inductor dice that use actual e-waste inductors, and our Snowflake dice with tiny Snowflake the cats embedded within the sharp edge resin dice on store.gamersnexus.net. Until November 21st, we're donating 10% of all dice sales to Cat Angels, a local, small, no-kill cat shelter that we've been supporting for years. Your purchases of dice will support us and them, and you'll get extremely unique, high-quality dice with custom wooden boxes and roll trays, cards usable in Magic the Gathering games, and 7 types of dice commonly found in tabletop games. The inductor dice use copper-colored lettering with a blue tint resin and embedded e-waste inductors, while the Snowflake dice set includes not only the Snowflake miniatures embedded within, but also a Snowflake Heedless One card that my mom did the art for and I designed the stats for. The inductor dice come with a goblin creature token that Andrew on the team did the 3D art for. The custom wooden box uses 3 pieces to keep everything together, latches for transit, an etched GN Alchemy logo, and an integrated roll tray. Support our work directly and help reduce our reliance on third-party advertisers by visiting store.gamersnexus.net. Welcome back to the Best of Roundup series. We do these every year at the end of the year for multiple different component categories. We have best cases coming up and a couple of others too. We run these to just kind of get a quick recap of everything and help get people up to speed efficiently. We know that a lot of you only really check in on computer parts every couple of years or so when you build a new system. So this series should help you quickly identify what's available, what's good, and then you can use it as a launching point to dig deeper from there and research the parts that interest you the most for your use case. As you find CPUs that are interested in this video, we'll link their original reviews below. There might be newer data available, there is in most cases, but that'll give you the sort of most in-depth version of what we have to offer for each of those CPUs. And then we'll also have the usual links to the retailers. They are typically affiliate links in the description below as well. As usual, these roundups don't go as charts heavy as our reviews, so if you want all the charts, you should check some of the reviews. We have like 40-minute ones out. These are meant to be more quick and simple and go over the key highlights with some charts to just reinforce the main points as we go. So there's a lot to get into today. We have a written version that'll go up on the website shortly if you want that recap. But for now, let's get into it. The first award category is for the best overall CPU for 2024. This one goes to the AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D CPU, which also takes our best gaming CPU category later. We'll save the gaming heavy discussion for this CPU for that category in a little bit. The 9800X3D gets best overall for a few other key reasons. First, its $480 price makes it a better buy than several of the other high-end CPUs that have come out recently, including the Intel 285K at its staggering $630 launch pricing. Secondly, the 9800X3D manages chart-topping gaming performance, which again we'll save for our best gaming category, while also managing overall acceptable production and workstation application performance. It's not the best in these workloads, but it's still capable. In Blender, the 9800X3D doesn't benefit from its extra cache, but still manages to at least outperform the lower power budget Zen 5 components that are 8 cores and fewer, like the 9700X. In Photoshop, the 9800X3D actually is the best, and ended up as the top performer here. Photoshop likes Zen 5 in general, from what we've tested so far, and benefits from its architectural changes, at least via the Puget suite, and that really shows with the 9800X3D. The 9800X3D is also an excellent overclocker, and it's fully unlocked, something that wasn't true for the prior X3D parts. It's such a good OC part that we even took it to stream to use liquid nitrogen and overclocked it at minus 140 degrees Celsius, yielding some ridiculous performance scaling in real games that we might not have expected previously. AMD moved the cache closer to the substrate, with the core complex getting cores right against the inside of the integrated heat spreader for this generation. This helped improve the thermal situation, which also is what gives AMD clock headroom. AMD Zen 5 is ground up built for X3D this time, and it shows. It's also a single CCD part, which keeps things as simple as possible to set up. We already know the 9800X3D is the king of gaming, but it's these other reasons that make it the best overall CPU for 2024. We can highly recommend this one for new, high-end gaming-focused builds especially, but it's an overall competent performer where needed in Workstation. The next award is for the most balanced CPU, which is a category we've used for years to ensure credit is given to CPUs that perform well both in Workstation or production applications and in gaming. This weighs all aspects of GN reviews, so it considers price, gaming performance, efficiency, production performance, and it's kind of meant for someone who does some gaming but also a good amount of work on their computer. Maybe you're a video editor and every now and then you play games on the same system. We're giving this to the AMD R9 7950X primarily, secondarily to the 14900K as a runner-up, now that its price has dropped. The 7950X lands here because its price has come down, so the 9950X is more expensive. The 14900K is on here as a secondary choice rather than sort of tied for first, because its poor handling of its instability issues caused us to question the company's successful resolution of all its problems. And second, Intel's efficiency is through the floor and its power is through the roof on this part, so just can't compete there with the 7950X. Currently, the 7950X has fallen to $480 and under, with the 14900K now at $440 at the time we're writing this. These CPUs both land on this list for their impressive workstation and production application performance, balancing good enough gaming with high throughput performance in use cases like file compression and decompression, rendering or code compile, and Adobe applications like Premiere for video editing. Now, the 285K had some impressive results in production, but it just has so many other faults, and its price is so high that it doesn't get a place here. The 9800X3D is a great CPU, but its limited core count is a significant disadvantage in these non-gaming tests we run. The 7950X, particularly with Eco Mode enabled, has some of the best efficiency we've seen in our CPU efficiency charts. The Threadripper parts can outperform it due to their incredible performance, but for a balance of price and performance, the 7950X remains strong. The 9950X does well in the same categories, but it's significantly more expensive, at least right now. The 14900K doesn't do well in efficiency. It's actually one of the least efficient we've looked at, but its gaming performance is a little higher in most places than the 7950X, and in production tests, it tends to trade places with the 7950X. With the new lower price, it is worth a second look. It's just the used market for these has been turned into a minefield with the stability issue parts potentially getting dumped secondhand. But ultimately, the 7950X has the advantage of being on a platform that'll live for many more years, and you may one day be looking at your own best upgrade CPU category in our 2027 or 2028 roundup for AM5. And that's the advantage AMD holds here. Next up is the award for the best gaming CPU. This one's extremely simple. We're strictly looking for the best possible gaming performance and ignoring all other factors, including cost. This is a numbers-based category for frame rate, and it's pretty simple. Fortunately, the best gaming CPUs these days are often cheaper than their non-gaming flagship counterparts. The AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D gets the award this year, and at $480, it's a clean sweep of the gaming charts. It isn't even close in some situations to other CPUs, surpassing even last year's winner, the 7800X3D, by sometimes large margins. We have several games in the 16% range, a lot of them in the 8 to 10% range, but overall, very strong uplift. Let's go by the numbers for this numbers-based award. From our 7600X3D review, you can see how AMD has completely taken over the top of the gaming charts. The 9800X3D has an incredible lead in Baldur's Gate 3, up at 160 FPS average to the 7800X3D's at 126. We spent some time in our 9800X3D review explaining and exploring this one, because the 26.9% uplift was uncharacteristic. Ultimately, it replicated, and we had data to support the finding. Dragon's Dogma 2 is a 2024 title that's extremely heavy on the CPU. This one had another breakout success, where the 9800X3D doesn't even take a second to identify with how it breaks away from the rest of the stack. The CPU holds a 16% lead over the 7800X3D, which was already the best gaming part before that. Intel isn't even close here. F124 also has the 9800X3D advantaged, even though it's becoming limited by other components. It still holds a lead here. Dawn Trail is another like this. Gains are lower, but ever present. Starfield posted an impressive uplift for the 9800X3D as well, jumping to 169 FPS average from 145 on the 7800X3D, which was already a good result. Frame time pacing is overall strong with the 9800X3D too. There are some categories where its 1% and 0.1% lows improve disproportionately from the average, which is another great result to see. Overall, the 9800X3D easily takes our Best Gaming CPU of the Year award for 2024, following up a strong showing from the 7800X3D before it. Next up is the award for Best Upgrade CPU, a category we added 2 years ago. This is the best CPU that can drop into a prior generation of motherboards. In-socket upgrades are great for consumers. They reduce wasteful spending on more boards and RAM that might not be needed, and they also reduce e-waste. They also keep builds more affordable. This year, the AMD R7 5700X3D easily secures the award. The preceding 5800X3D got Best Upgrade last year, but it has since largely disappeared as a new in-box purchase, and its price has gone up. The 5700X3D has taken its place, commonly available between a shockingly low $180 to a more typical $230. The 5700X3D is able to achieve most of the performance of the 5800X3D CPU when looking at gaming charts. Typically, it's within 10 percentage points, often fewer. The 5800X3D benefits from a higher frequency though, so there are some situations where you'll see the 5700X3D dip down the charts. One example is Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail, where in the benchmark, the 5700X3D ran at a frame rate that gave the 5800X3D an advantage of 11%. This is one of the highest deltas we saw in gaming between the two parts. The 5600X3D even outperforms the 5700X3D in Final Fantasy specifically, which sometimes confuses people. The 5600X3D may have fewer cores, but its frequency is 300 MHz higher. Both are 105 watt TDP parts, so reducing the core count means that more power budget on the 56 is available for the clocks. Generally speaking though, the 5700X3D is the better performer between the two. In Baldur's Gate 3, we saw the 57X3D just behind the 76X3D, and about 10 FPS behind the 5800X3D. That's an incredible rank for a part that's around $230. Especially considering it's outperforming a $630 285K or a $440 14900K, depending on when you watch this video because that price keeps changing. Broadly speaking, the 5700X3D's price is wild, and the fact that AM4 boards exist in high quantities on the used market also makes it a good consideration for even a used new build because you might have a lower cost to entry. The CPU can socket into AM4 boards. If you already have an AM4 board from an old Ryzen build, it's likely that a BIOS update will allow it to support the 5700X3D. Some older boards, especially from the first gen of Ryzen, are spotty on their support, so check the motherboard CPU support list to be sure. We're going to give a runner-up mention to the 14700K, which is about $350 these days. If you're on an Alder Lake 12600K or something, this might make sense to upgrade to in-socket. Just check to make sure your motherboard's actually compatible with it. You need to update BIOS, and also make sure the VRM is capable of the higher heat load. This is a short one. This award is for the most efficient CPU we've tested this year, and it goes to AMD's somewhat obscure Ryzen 5 7600X3D. This part is sold in microcenters in the US and, from what our European viewers have told us, sparingly in some European retailers. It's not widely available, but when it is available, it seems to be around $300. In gaming workloads, the 7600X3D had impressively efficient results. Its power consumption was just 43 watts in our Baldur's Gate 3 test, which allowed it to run at 2.7 FPS per watt and outrank even the 9800X3D and 7800X3D in efficiency, both of which were impressive already. In Dawn Trail, we saw chart-breaking results that required us to adjust our chart axis. The 7600X3D outdid everyone for efficiency there. The CPU is somewhat rare, but its combination of lower TDP and X3D on Zen 4 is what enables this performance. Definitely an impressively efficient part, and we want to encourage more CPUs like this. It's just too bad about the somewhat limited supply. If this CPU were more widely available, we probably would have selected it for our best mid-range CPU category as well. But we needed something widely available and a little cheaper. So speaking of, here's that category next. The next award is for the best mid-range CPU. This lineup is lacking in $150 to $200 parts so far, and we're looking for something that's overall balanced at this price range. Considerations for this category would include AMD's R5 7600 non-X at $198 and benefiting from a modern AM5 platform, Intel's 14400F i5 CPU or 13400F, neither of which make much sense at their prices, and Intel's i7 12700KF at $190. We're giving this award to the i7 12700KF, which feels weird since it's from 2021. But the modern market means prior generation parts are persisting longer than typical. Above $200 and with a gaming-only build, the 5700X3D might make more sense. But the 12700KF gives a great balance of workstation performance and gaming performance. And it has a big benefit of not being on Intel's plagued architectures. This was the one that skated by. In gaming, the 12700KF typically lands alongside the Intel 245K, which is currently $320, so a big jump up from the $190 of the 12700KF, or AMD's 5700X3D, 5600X, or 7700X and 9700X parts. The 5700X3D is more gaming focused and tends to be a little more expensive. The 7700X is frequently more expensive, and the 9700X is $320 to $350, if not more, depending on where and when you look. In production, the 12700KF is similar to an R7 7700X or 9700X in many cases. It outperforms most of the X3D parts thanks to its core counts, and it equates Intel's 14600K or 245K. The 245K does well in our production tests when compared to the 12700KF, despite its shortcomings overall, just happens to be more expensive. It's weird to put a CPU this old on the list, and we've already put CPUs around this era from AM4 on the list, but AMD and Intel really haven't had a lot of activity below $200 for a few years now, except for things like the 7600, which is just below 200, but is still technically a prior generation, so the market's changed a bit for how it behaves. We'll keep this one short. This is for the best high-end desktop CPU. For the second year in a row, mostly because there aren't any replacements yet, this is going to AMD's Threadripper 7970X. We liked the 7980X, but its super high core count is more limited in use case. If you need 64 cores, you probably know it, and it's like $5,000, so kind of a different class. We've found the 7970X, still expensive, to be an excellent balance at least in production workloads that we use in our office. It's a 32-core part, it's not as extreme as the 7980, and it did great in our testing with Adobe Premiere. It has a ton of I/O capabilities with extra PCIe lanes that open up storage options for true sort of localized workstation class computers, and along with other Threadripper parts, it had some of the best efficiency results we'd presented in those specific production workloads that utilize the cores. It also performed especially well in our spec workstation benchmarks previously, to the point that the 7950X wasn't close in some comparisons. But for now, we'd advise waiting on a purchase in this category in general if you can. It sounds like the beginning of next year will be pretty busy for everybody, and current rumors about a 9950X3D or possible replacements in HEDT may be a reason to pay attention there as well and hold off. Next up is the best gaming CPU under $100. This one's pretty self-explanatory. This goes to a split because the price is variable. The R5 5600, the i3 13100F, or i3 12100F all get attention here. Once again, multiple years in the running, the i3 12100F from Intel ends up on the list, but unlike last year, the i3 13100F has also fallen below $100. The R5 5600 non-X ends up on this list as well, with all three CPUs taking this category. Out of these three CPUs, the AMD R5 5600 is the best overall balance and performer in most categories. The only reason to exclude it in favor of the i3s is if it's over $100 when you check this. That is the criteria here. But right now, there are OEM CPU-only listings for $99.99, which technically qualifies for the list. Value goes down at its other common mark of $120 though, and it falls off the list at that point. The 12100F is $77, which would be crazy if it weren't 2 years old. The i3 13100F is $80. Neither of these F SKUs have IGPs, which is why they're cheap. When we looked at the i3 13100F last year, we found that the 13100F frequently outperformed the R5 5500 with a significant percentage advantage. The 5500, in our opinions, is not good enough to consider. It's slightly more expensive than the 13100F, but it's worse, and both are on dead platforms anyway. For gaming, looking at our data from last year when we had all three of these CPUs on the charts, the R5 5600 regularly outperformed the 13100F and 12100F. In fact, it was even over the 12400 in some tests. If you can find it under $100, the 5600 makes a lot of sense for this category. but even a few bucks over it, it's not bad. But where the i3 12100F and 13100F are $20+ cheaper, and where the strictest possible budgets exist and you just simply can't go higher for price, they're still capable performers. We recently ran the 12100F again and found that it was capable in every game we tested, with one exception of extremely spotty frame times in our Baldur's Gate 3 test. The core and thread count is showing its age here. It's impressive how much these three CPUs are capable of. They're still playing games, and mostly without major frame pacing issues. It's just unfortunate that Intel and AMD haven't really launched anything new into this market for such a long time now. The last category is for the biggest disappointment. Intel gets this one for the second year running. 2022 saw it going to AMD for the 4500, so it's been a bit of an upset where Intel has taken the ball from AMD. This year's disappointment, though, puts all other ones into perspective. The 13th and 14th gen stability issues this year get the award, reminding us that where other disappointments simply suck, there's always room to suck more. The 13th and 14th gen CPUs experienced a mix of problems, including fab-level oxidation defects confirmed by Intel, all the way up to wider-scale stability issues relating to voltage and microcode. Intel fumbled the handling of this and lost consumer confidence, dragging its feet on a response and then trying to craft a careful narrative when it finally did respond. This was followed up by the Ultra 200 series, which went back to simply being a disappointing set of products rather than a truly catastrophic and impressive failure. But this industry needs Intel and AMD to both compete head-to-head. Intel of the past showed us what happens when the market has only one dominating vendor back in the 14nm plus days. And Nvidia and GPUs shows us maybe a glimpse of a similar future. It's just not the job of consumers to prop up a company that sells subpar products. You don't need to kickstart Intel. Or in the case of the disappointment this year with the 13th and 14th gen, it's not your job to buy products that had a potential time bomb failure baked in. In the very least, though, Intel has at least eventually and finally responded with microcode patches that they say have fixed the issue. It's just we won't fully know for a while yet because this is a time-based issue. Pricing today is the giant variable at the end of all this. It moves around all the time, and especially as we approach Black Friday, which is America's #1 holiday. It's when we celebrate complete consumerism and chaos. So as that approaches, of course, the prices are going to change here. All this is based on the price at the time we wrote the video, but hopefully you have enough information here to sort of make some decisions even as those numbers move around. It's always a little weird when some of the parts are prior generation components, but if they're the best parts for that price or for that use case, it doesn't really matter how old they are, except for one factor, which is the potential upgradability. So the older the platform is, if you're buying into AM4 today, it feels a little bad, only because it's the end of the line. I mean, if you're buying a 5700X3D, it doesn't get much better than that for AM4, except the 5800X3D, and that upgrade wouldn't make sense, or a 5950X or something in production. So that's the only sort of downside of buying into those older ones that's major, other than things like modernized I/O support and all that. We cover all that in our reviews. Not going to go over it as in depth here. The biggest area that's lacking right now in CPUs is the sub $100 market. It's aging with the 12100F and the 13100F. The R5 5600 is only rarely sub $100 right now when we're checking before, of course, this video goes live, but it would become the go-to choice for us if it ever solidifies in that sub $100 range. Sub 200 has better options, but it's still mostly older components. That's it for this roundup, though. Hopefully that helps get you up to speed. Check back for best cases. We didn't get to do a full usual best cases roundup last year because we were overhauling our test methodology, but we can this year. Really excited about that one. I'm working on that with Patrick. And we love working on these in general because they're a ton of fun to work back through the components, see how they did. And it also helps just remind us that in spite of all of the vendors' hardest work, assuring us that there will be another disappointment build at the end of the year, there are parts that are not disappointing and actually did pretty well. So it's nice to just have that reminder for the positive launches. More of this coming up. Links to all the reviews are below. If you need any more detail on anything, the product links are below. And then, of course, you can support us and the work we do on store.gamersnexus.net, where you can grab some of our brand new dice sets, including two variations, one with e-waste inductors inside of the sharp edge resin dice on the store, and the other with tiny Snowflake the cat inside the resin dice. And each set comes with a custom wooden box we've made. Check that out on the store. It directly funds the work we do into the next year. Thank you for watching, subscribe for more, and we'll see you all next time.